Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to introduce you to not one, not two, but three leopard geckos that I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming home this year. I upgraded my leopard gecko enclosures. Here's some of them. There's multiple. There's 31 of them. But you know, here's one stack. And because I was in the process of getting new enclosures and upgrading all of them, I didn't introduce these geckos when I got them. So I've actually had them since like June and July. But now that they are in their like enclosures and everything is set up and everything looks good, I feel like it's time to properly introduce them. Before we get into the three new geckos, I ask that you subscribe and hit the notification bell, and away we go. First and foremost, if you're new to this channel, all my leopard geckos come from situations of rescue, rehoming, or adoption. A lot of times they'll have a special need like a birth defect or a neurological disorder, or like they'll have conditions that are from being rescued and having been poorly cared for before, like metabolic bone disease. So they all have like a little bit of a backstory, and so I want to go into the different backstories of each of my geckos here, but each of them has their own little quirk, so to speak, and their own like situation. So this isn't just going to be like me unboxing them. I'm just gonna give a little bit of detail about them, and I'm gonna put some pictures of them on the back while I talk about them. So first up is Alysanne. So an individual actually emailed me requesting that I offer assistance and or take in two geckos. One was called Bean and the other one was called Tula, and they had been cohabbed, and then this person had taken them from the person who had basically abused them and neglected them. So they were cohabbed, and Bean had really bad metabolic bone disease, a lot of stuck shed, just was a really bad situation. And then Tula, who is Alysanne, was a little bit better off. She didn't have metabolic bone disease, but she was missing a lot of toe tips and she had a big scar on her back. So just both geckos, they needed to just be better kept. And throughout the time of talking with this person about Bean and Tula, I was prepared to take both of them, but when they took Bean to the vet, they made the decision to euthanize Bean, and I had a lot of like strong feelings about that, I'm not gonna lie, because like I had gotten attached to Bean, but of course it was up to them to make that decision, and I don't fault them for making that decision. But I was supposed to get both geckos, Bean and Tula, and you know, all things happen for a reason. Perhaps Bean was just not meant to be with me. It is what it is. But I do have Tula, who is Alysanne. And by the way, I renamed my geckos with Game of Thrones names in keeping with all the other geckos who have Game of Thrones names. So she's named after Alysanne, who's a Targaryen. Anyways, Alysanne has like a really, really big personality. She always comes to the front of the enclosure. Sorry, I was looking over at her enclosure. She always comes to the front of the enclosure when I want to interact with her, or even if I'm just walking by. She's always asking for food. She always eats, never misses a meal. She's energetic, and she gets around really well despite having like almost all of her front toes like chopped in half. Like she's missing half of all of her toes on the front. And the giant scar on her back, we think it's due to a burn, like she was burnt from her heat coming from above, because typically if they're burnt from below, it's their tails that get burnt because the tails are very fatty. And so this actually, if you don't use a thermostat with your heat pad, is something that you run the risk of experiencing. But your gecko's tail could get burnt because it's very fatty, and so that's what you normally see. Whereas the top of a gecko will be burnt if there is a heat source from above that's too warm. I am grateful to the individual who contacted me because now I have Alysanne in my life. I'm also grateful that they took better care of Bean and Tula while they were in their care, so I just want to put that out there. I'm very appreciative. I like to say that Alysanne is like Vash's little sister. So Vash is my fiance's leopard gecko that I take care of, so he's really my gecko, but I didn't name him Vash. I would have named him Jorah, but whatever. Alysanne and Vash look almost identical. Like, of course, there's different markers that you can pick out. Like, for example, he has all his toes and he doesn't have a scar. He's a little bit wider. She's smaller. She has missing toe tips. She has her scar. But it's funny because, like, between Tywin and Vash and Alysanne, it's like small, medium, large. And that's like, they all look that similar. It cracks me up. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Alysanne joined the family on June 18th of this year. Almost exactly a month later, a gecko that I named Kinvara joined the family on July 14th. I saw her on Instagram as a pet only seeking rehoming, and I noticed straight away that she was a white and yellow morph, so I thought, I bet you she has white and yellow syndrome. White and yellow syndrome is a neurological disorder. I get crap for talking about it on my channel because it's not as prevalent as Enigma syndrome, but it does exist, so it is worth discussing. Really reputable breeders who breed white and yellows will not breed geckos that have this syndrome. However, there are still geckos that are out there in the population that have white and yellow syndrome. The responsible thing to do is to rehome them to someone who's not going to breed them, which is why Kinvara is with me. This breeder had purchased her with the intention of breeding her, but upon meeting Kinvara, the breeder decided obviously that wasn't an ethical thing to do, which I applaud, and I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to have Kinvara because they did the right thing. So if you're watching this, thank you very much. And Kinvara is doing really well. She is definitely a neurological baby. Like, she's definitely like wibbly wobbly. However, she does great with tongue feeding. She's very enthusiastic about feeding, really well behaved, like in terms of interacting. She doesn't have a problem when it comes to handling, which of course I do at a minimum, because when it comes to neuro geckos, you don't want to handle them too often. But you know, for health checks and stuff, that's important. She's really great at it. She's just a really easy gecko for a neuro gecko especially, so I'm really grateful for that. But she's just lovely. I'm really happy to have her. But 15 days or so later, after Kinvara, I welcomed home Tyrion. Tyrion is a Eublepharus macellarius afghanicus, and he has some extra skin, and he has like a really stunted or short face, so he just is a little bit different looking. He also gets like this little skin growth over his eye, which I've also experienced in some of my other special needs geckos, so it's like not a problem. I'm just like skit with a little bit of, you know, skeet, oh my god, whatever. I do that with a little bit of saline solution on a Q-tip and it fixes the problem right up. But I've seen extra skin on geckos, I've seen facial deformities or just a different head shape on geckos, I've seen geckos that have eye problems. A lot of these can be brought to incubation. Like, if there's a fluctuation with the incubation temperature, it can cause a little bit of wonkiness in the gecko, and sometimes that results in like geckos like Tyrion. So he just got a little bit of extra skin, he's a little bit wrinkly, he's a little bit goofy looking, but he was really well loved by the breeder that rehomed him to me. And I actually didn't reach out to this breeder about Tyrion. I was reaching out because they were rehoming an African fat-tail gecko that was born with 3 feet instead of 4. So he just has like a nub, and I'll talk about him in a separate video because he's an African fat-tail, so I want to keep him separate. But I was reaching out to that breeder about Jaime, who's the African fat-tail gecko, and then they said, hey, do you have the space for this one? It's a pet-only Eublepharus macellarius afghanicus. And I was like, absolutely, like I love him just on first sight. He is so cute, and he's just lovely. Like I really love leopard geckos, okay? Like if that wasn't obvious, I'm a very basic reptile lady, and leopard geckos have my heart and soul. So when I saw him, I was like, absolutely yes. And now he's living in a 24 by 18 by 12, and he is precious beyond words. He's really slow to like warm up. Like, it took him a bit to start eating with me. It took him a bit to start really just like coming around to me. But now that he does, oh, he's the most precious baby. Like, last night was feeding night, and he has always like eaten, but he's always just been like meh about eating. But last night he was like excited about it, and I was like, yes. And he really loves digging. I'll include a clip here of him digging, which is amazing because he's like flinging the dirt, and he's just really great. Whenever I open his door, or whenever I'm in the pet room, even if the door of his enclosure is closed, he'll just sit there and watch me in the room. And when I open his door, he like pops his head out and just looks at me and watches as I prepare his food. Like, he's just amazing. He's so interactive, and he's really just gentle, and he's good. He's a good gecko. Those are my 3 leopard geckos, and I actually recently brought home another. That's a whole other story. I've actually already shared this gecko online on Patreon, but not anywhere else. So if you're the kind of person who was interested in like early access to videos, or seeing like new pets before I share them elsewhere, or seeing enclosure builds like behind the scenes and things like that, Patreon is a place for that. The link is below. But that's just like where I've always shared like early stuff. And plus the people on there, they hype me up and they get me excited whenever I have a new one, so it's really fun to share it with somebody, you know. I will also be recording a video about Jaime, my African Fanta gecko, like I said. But that's everything I have to say about the 3 leopard geckos that were welcome home this summer. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, let me know down below with a comment and a like. Also subscribe, hit that notification bell. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!